I started writing it all over the halls of the juvenile institution. Everybody talked about my name all over the jail. So I figured if they talk about my name all over the jail, they would talk about my name all over the street. And that's exactly what happened. The more they talked, the more I wrote. The more they talked, the more I wrote.
As he did this, his name seemed to grow and grow and grow, and he just became a household name more or less.
Originating in Philadelphia in the 60s, when a boy going by the name of Cornbread started painting his name on walls to get the attention of a girl, graffiti rapidly evolved and broke into other major cities in the US, giving way for the birth of new artists, styles, and genres. In the Bronx and Harlem in the 70s and 80s, that meant finding the biggest, most public canvases around. It was just the cherry on top that they moved, and New York was too broke to maintain them: subway cars. At the time, the goal was about getting your name up, being seen, expressing a voice and style, and claiming your own slice of the concrete jungle. The only way how was by sheer volume. However, every city had its limits and there were only so many great spots, so naturally it became competitive. Graffiti obviously was and still is illegal, and so it lended itself to being popular among criminal gangs. The result was that the competitive nature of graffiti escalated in the midst of gangs and created a landscape of conflict and violence. This added another reason for the mainstream to view graffiti in such a negative light, and fueled the debate that graffiti is not art.
I've seen people get shot, I've seen people get stabbed. If you got a problem with me, I will fuck you up.
Soon, artists developed a different approach to this unsanctioned public art, deciding that they did not need to be limited to the style of graffiti. Evolving from graffiti, street art was popularized by the likes of Banksy, Space Invader, and Shepard Fairey, who created public art more closely resembling pieces found in museums. With the same intention of bringing voices to the marginalized, street artists aimed to bring art outside of the gallery, sparking debates about whether it more closely resembled vandalism or art. With the growth of the internet and social media, graffiti and street art were no longer confined to the limits of one neighborhood. Now a single piece could be viewed by millions of people, even after it was painted over, effectively making it timeless. Photos posing in front of street art on social media popularized restaurants, bars, and entire neighborhoods, and by proxy the artists themselves, making it less about territory and more about fame, name recognition, and clout. Graffiti and later street art is a vehicle for creativity and honest self-expression, encouraged by the anonymous nature of the art. It can be used as a tool to create communities by inciting solidarity amongst artists and developing a sense of ownership of subsections of cities. It typically gives voice to resistance to societal structures that govern the lives of the marginalized and oppressed by putting their struggles in the face of the public at large. Using the streets as a canvas, artists directly communicate, comment, and express themselves for all to see. Demands of the oppressed can no longer be ignored. After decades of evolution and with a history rooted in expression and individuality, today, graffiti and street art face what could potentially be their largest threat to date: commercialization. With graffiti and street art now being a globally recognized movement, businesses and corporations have identified that by mimicking graffiti style, they take advantage of the deeply rooted history and impersonate the legitimacy of the movement in order to sell more products. In many instances, it's even difficult to differentiate corporate graffiti from authentic works. What appears to be artistic and visually stimulating actually has an underlying motivation to sell more of a product or service, and therefore abandons the true values of graffiti. With commercialization's inevitable entry into graffiti, what some have called brandalism, there are many who pose strong oppositions, claiming it to be gentrifying, counterfeit, deceptive, and selling out. Corporations' use of graffiti makes it no longer exclusively a voice for the marginalized. Some argue that it is now being utilized by the exact people who are often deemed responsible for creating disparity and marginalization. For instance, in 2018, fast fashion giant H&M released an advertising campaign that noticeably featured the works of well-known graffiti artist Reebok in the background without the sanction or even awareness of the artist. Reebok rebelled on the basis that he didn't want his art to be mistakenly associated with the brand and used to leverage their image on his behalf. H&M responded by launching a countersuit, alleging that the work was painted illegally and not subject to copyright protection, therefore setting a legal precedent that could threaten the rights of all street artists. This sparked uproar from the community and generated severe negative press that swayed H&M to drop the claim. The graffiti and street art community showcased to the world their massive influence against commercialization, but in many smaller circumstances that hasn't been the case, and so where do we draw the line and what do we deem acceptable? From an artist's perspective, that presents a challenging decision, as they must determine if they are willing to forego their artistic freedom and core graffiti values for a paycheck, otherwise known as selling out, or maintain their integrity and risk being broke. But wait a second, is being commissioned by a business selling out, or simply making a living? Company-commissioned art can elevate the standards of street art since it encourages high-quality work and stylistic skills. As a result, paid contracts can create a legitimate occupation for artists and could be a force that pushes the street art scene into becoming a more credible art form. Finally, artists are being compensated for their work that is not in a gallery. Regardless, is this still the commercialization of an underground culture, or can the legitimacy associated to this style be used as a tool for good? Take Bumble, a dating app that commissioned an advertisement made by women artists depicting women of all races and sizes, promoting the empowerment of women. It questioned the male-dominated world of street art and promoted equality. Are you telling me this is wrong? Bumble should not be giving voice to women artists and promoting a much-needed conversation? Is it better to have positive conversations sparked by brands than nothing at all? Commissioned graffiti or street art can also have the positive impact of calling attention to and beautifying an area. For instance, a restaurant that commissions a work on an exterior wall. By doing so, they are creating an employment opportunity for artists, drawing attention to the restaurant both from pedestrians and through digital exposure, and contributing to the beautification of the neighborhood. Graffiti and street art have dramatically changed since Cornbread first wrote his name on a wall in the 60s. And as it continues to evolve, it will be up to us as consumers to set the precedent for what we deem acceptable. Moving forward, who will have a voice? Only those who can afford it? How do we expect artists to make a living? Does commercializing graffiti devalue other graffiti? Can graffiti be for the majority and still maintain its heritage and meaning? Do you have the answers?